Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? I hope you're doing well. I feel I may sound a little funny, maybe allergies, but um, I don't have anything yet. I just feel strange. So you may hear it on my voice. But everybody, I hope everybody's doing good and you can enjoy these days out. Um, we are gonna um, do a painting, and you will follow me. Um, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm not gonna do too much, um, maybe techniques or things like this. I'm gonna just paint with the watercolor, and we're going to, like always, use the water to create different tones of the same color. So let's see. In this time, we're gonna need a pencil. So besides our regular materials, please include a pencil. So we have our paint, our brush, our water, um, waters, paper, and the pencil. Um, Always, if you have more than one brush, that's always very practical. You don't have to be cleaning your brush that often. Okay, and then get started. Um, so gather your materials, and yeah, we're gonna do a watercolor, and I'm gonna be looking at the picture. You're gonna follow me, but the picture is a painting of Cezanne, um, a little later impressionist painter. You consider impressionist, but a little more post impressionism between for the stuff he did. And he did a lot of landscapes, some still lifes, oil paintings. But when it came to watercolor, not that many still lifes, mostly landscapes with watercolor. But there are some watercolor still lifes, and that's what I will copy as you follow me. That's what we'll use our pencil to make sure that you draw and with me draw the image that right we're trying to copy. I'm going to sharpen my pencil. um, yeah, and a lot of knowledge in composition, so the way things are organized and placed. But let's get started so we understand a little bit of what's going to happen. um, So, and I'm gonna draw in masses, like big groups. So if you remember and you've been with me for a while, uh, just like I said, I'm gonna do masses groups. So, for example, if we see oranges, then they're circles. So that's the mass, that's the shape. But you will understand with our drawing that we learn and started learning our classes by learning shapes and understanding that anything that you want to draw, anything in the world, you could fundamentally um, simplify it with shapes, and you could start with those shapes to start the image. So that's what I mean by masses. When it comes to fabric, it's very organic, and obviously, still lifes have fabric hanging around, or um, so. Um, you will follow what you see, the way the fabric is set up. Um, But other objects that are more solid, they tend to follow either a sphere, right, the circle, a pyramid, a cylinder, or cube or rectangle, cube, yeah. So you know that type of thing, right? Like this pencil, if I get to draw it, I could start by shaping it as a cylinder, thin cylinder, that type of thing. But we have videos for that already made. So let's get started. And the big mass is like this. From I want you to think of the middle of the paper from dividing the top and the bottom and kind of mark it lightly. Don't make too much of a dark line, but mark it where it is, which is actually kind of like that down here. But I'm gonna raise that maybe to a little bit, just a little bit, like about here. Raise it like half an inch, so maybe about here. Um, the mass comes from here, about the middle, a little bit under the middle, goes up a mountain here, half of it comes down and comes down like this. It's like if you threw a blanket to a table and some chairs to cover them up. So I'm gonna make this darker for the aspect of the video. Again, goes up, down, like this. There's gonna be kind of like a pot here, like a coffee pot, round, with a cover that has like a round hat, a round cover. Okay. This is just the cover, which is kind of round with a little ball on the top. There's like a loop here, and then there's the handle here. There's another kind of similar pot down here. So we're gonna do the top, the round cover, and then we're gonna do the. But the roundness is kind of like at the bottom of this one, very down here actually. And then now I see what the circle is for. Now I see better the image. So there's a blue. This is gonna be dark like a blue, and this is gonna be kind of like white. But the circle, which this one also has it about here, is the handle. So I'm gonna make a curve here going like this. See that? And this one has that too. It's just that the darkness of the blue kind of took over that. So I'm gonna show you closer. See? So imagine if I lift this, that would be my handle. So they're both facing the same way. They're kind of similar in size. I guess the one in the back is bigger and the one in front is kind of thinner and going down lower. But remember, the back is going to be blue and the first in front is going to be white, which is the paper. And then there's going to be a cylinder here, jar, kind of like this. I'm going to shorten this, okay? I'm going to make this bump kind of end around here. So my painting is going to end around here. That's the thing, as you keep drawing things, you start seeing the proportion and where things should actually be. So here's the opening of the jar. Has a handle that goes about here, all the way down about here. Let me draw it and I'll show you closer so you can copy it. But this is the opening of the jar, narrow, of the mark, the spot here. Okay. And then we're gonna start doing some oranges and some fabric. But you see, so basically, this handle is a very narrow oval, and the whole thing is like a cylinder. I curve it a little, but it's gonna be white too. And we don't see the bottom because there's actually an orange right here, okay? I'm gonna make a circle right here, which represents an orange. And I'm gonna do another one right about here. 2 and 3, covering the pot. I'm gonna erase what the oranges are covering. So there's 3 oranges looping around this pot. One, two, three. There's one behind here. Okay, between the 2 pots. There's one kind of not isolated, but kind of like about here. There's 3. I'm gonna say 3. So there's one here, one next to it, and one kind of covered here. And the reason I'm doing halves here is because they're gonna be covered by the fabric. Look, I'm gonna show you closer. And now I'm erasing the line that came across the oranges. So sorry if I'm going fast, but I did 1, 2 next to it, and 1 right in front. And these are halves because I made this bump line, which is kind of like the fabric coming down over. And this could be bumps here too of the fabric. I'm erasing the line of the fabric coming across all this stuff. And while I'm now, remember that line? Remember the paper is cut right through the middle here? And I point out and I erase a line maybe half an inch above. So let's draw that line, but not over the stuff that we drew. So behind it. So I'm making that line, but behind what we just drew. And maybe I'll do a couple, one line up under the other. And that's like if there was a wall that has a division. You know how sometimes you're walking down a hall and right about your mid chest or shoulder in the wall, there's a division. That's part of a design. Um, um, Maybe there's a different material of the wall. Maybe it's a different color. I'm not sure exactly the purpose of it. I believe it's because that part of the wall under it gets more maybe hit or bang or used than the upper one. But Some houses have wood, right, on the lower part, but there's a division in the wall, and this line represents that. So we have a wall. These two things are a wall. These two divisions, and what's in front of the wall is this mass of fabric, which on top has two jars, three jars. It's just a different shape, differently shaped. Let me do a bump around here, and one jar is very thin cylinder, and there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, and eight oranges. This one is hidden halfway. These two are very close to each other in front of the pots. Erase anything inside the circles unless it's an orange that goes above the other, like this. Um, okay. Um, all right. I know. I'm going to show you closer. And maybe here you can pause it. But this is the main mass group of what we did. And if you notice, I erase inside here, I erase here. Because the orange is on top of the coffee. Okay? The orange is on top of the coffee. Can't wait to get started painting, but we need to still do a fabric. So, and by the way, this is 9 by 12, so 12 by 9. And you could always adjust your drawing as long as you keep it here in the center. You know, later I could cut this here because I realized my drawing was going too much. There was too much space here that's not part of the painting. Basically, saying the painting is a little more squarish. Um, but the fabric is right in the middle here, where most of the things here in the middle are resting. So follow me here. Okay, I'm gonna bring the camera closer. This is what we're gonna do. Right in front of this orange, the orange is not on top of it. The fabric kind of comes right in front of it, coming down here. And there's fabric here, and then comes from under here. And now I'm gonna go in an angle here and go up. And then come down between these two oranges right here. A line comes through in an angle, kind of like that. And then this comes in an angle towards this tip. So you want to join basically, but it gets cut out. And if I get cut out like this, it's because it is like that in the painting, okay? And then here, and this part, let me talk about that. This is part of the Impressionist style. Before Impressionist, if you were doing this, you will show the entire fabric, right? Where this ends or this tip ends. But you can understand in the late 1800s, photography was very common. Photography is not just not discovered, but it's really starting to be something in the mid 1800s. But by the late, it was more common. Obviously, you need to still, have the resources or to be photographed and things like that. But photography was more common. And what photography does, regardless of when you try to focus on something, other things get cut out, right? A tree in the background gets cut out, something. So artists started to realize that that's really how things are looked at. So they started doing that in paintings too. So it's kind of like a cool thing. making things a little more real, um, by photography bringing that obvious concept when we were having an image out of others, when we select something to look at out of a bigger picture. But in reality, through history, before that, you were going to draw something or paint something, everything was kind of like perfectly inside this frame. Okay. Well, no longer. And Degas was clearly doing that. Degas, famous for his ballet dances and all that stuff. But okay, so something that this fabric has, just to emphasize before we start painting, it has, those kitchen cloth have sometimes a line, a different color, maybe orange, or sometimes it's red, or it could be any color, but usually it's those colors of a design in the fabric at the edges, towards the edges. So that line is here. And when you have fabric folded, that line curves, right? So that line, let me give you an example, comes here, this thick, comes here, and then hides in some fold here. So here's the line. Comes down here too. So it comes here. Look. You see? So this will be kind of like orangey or red here too. And then here kind of comes across from the right here, and it gets cut coming down like that. So that's the cool thing about fabric, that you could, in the painting, kind of like, cut angles, and that shows foldish. That, sorry, that shows that the fabric is being folded. So instead of the line keep going, continuing straight, it goes from here down, and that shows that there's a fold about right here. All right, this is the basic design. Obviously, the this mask back here, that's fabric, also has patterns, and there's a lot of lines and circles, orangey blue. We'll see how much of that we can do. Okay, but let's start painting, not forgetting leaving the white of the paper where things are white. So this, follow me here. Um, these are the things that are kind of white. This picture is white. This picture is white. The fabric with the red stripe is white. That's it. There's going to be highlights in the oranges, yes, but those are the main things that are going to be white. That doesn't mean that the entire thing is purely white. There will be, usually in this case, we're going to use blue to kind of shape it, you know. But the blue just show, in this case, shade of the white, right? Because we can't just leave it purely just white. And I'm talking about the main outlines. The main body of it, yes, will be white because that's the color it has. Same thing with the fabric. But wherever there's fold, like this line I did here in the fabric of a fold, more likely will be kind of bluish. So the bluish is the shade of the white color, rather than a different color, which will trick us, because you will say, why is that different? Why is that um, that other color if the fabric is actually white? So what I mean is this: if I were, and I'm going to erase this, if I were to draw in watercolor a pearl, this circle is a pearl. What I'm trying to say is the body of the circle is white. But as I define the pearl, right, the circumference outline and all this, I might do it light blue, because I need a color, right? The paper is white. I need to distinguish the paper from what I'm actually painting that is white. So what I'm trying to say is whatever color I use to make those definitions will be more likely light blue, and the blue becomes the shade of the white, darker, that defines outlines, shades, things like that. We don't want to use a different color. Maybe gray will be okay, but we don't want red or blue because then that will say that that's the color of the pearl, which we know pearls are white or like a shiny glossy, you know. Okay, so we won't touch too much the inside of this picture, this one, and the fabric because it's white. Okay, but let's start in layers from this part of the wall. Then yeah, I mean we could do the bottom part of the wall later. We're not going to really touch too much um, on these outlines when we do sections, just to be careful. But overall, wherever there's foldage, the fabric here or things, blue will be the color that we use to outline these things. He's not that concrete, so Cezanne, and this is pretty well defined, but his paintings, even in this definition, there's a little breakage into not completing outlines or shapes. And he will get to do things that were even more abstract. Well, he will do less of that, less and less and less. So you will see oranges, let's say, or trees in a landscape, but they were really barely represented. They were broken down in not a clear, complete outline, but lines barely there. And then what that does is, like I said, it makes the image more abstract. And that's why he's considered, without him realizing, the father of modern art and abstract painting because it wasn't really abstract because you could see that it was a landscape or you could see that it was a still life. Abstract means you can't really define what is represented by the real world. um, or actually, sorry, abstract means something from the real world gets broken down into parts. So that's what he started doing basically with his painting without knowing, by simplifying the image. That's what I mean. So when we do these lines, we're gonna not be too clear in outlining them all around. You know, we're gonna break it apart a little bit, if that makes sense. But let's get started. So the top part of the wall here is kind of like a very light green, and yeah. So let's get our green. And we're gonna work just like we drew. And I always recommend we do that. You don't focus just on one little area and build upon that. No, you focus on everything at the same time. If you notice, we did the whole big mass, and then we do things on it. Or right, I didn't went and completed this corner and then move to this area. No, you gotta work all together. So what I mean to say about that is we might add colors to the wall later on because I'm not completely done, right? So this is a very thick paper, and it can sustain water. It's green, um, and I'm leaving some patches with more green than other areas. You know, but I'm keeping it light. That's the key word, light. And I'm moving my brush in different directions. See how I'm moving my brush and I don't complete certain areas, and just because of that, it looks a little more kind of like um, painterly, I guess. And some areas have more green than others. Okay. part. And you notice that I stop here. So if you want to do that into your paper because you have the same measures, but if it's shorter, if it's 8 by 11, it may be the same proportion. So you may need to um, cut down in this space here. But what I'm saying, we're gonna here and there maybe try to add a little bit of blue in one area one day. I don't know, you know. Okay. So this down here is a little more brownish, but he will mix a lot of colors. So um, the green up here will have tons of yellow and blue. We could add later if we have, you know. But down here, this brown is going to be lighter. Again, just like the green. So I'm keeping my brown light, and the only way I can do that is with water. Um, Up here, we could add maybe a little bit of yellow into the brown. We'll see. That's it. I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow into this top part. Now the overall kind of color of this cloth, not the white one, the one behind, is kind of this greenish, yellowy, brownish. So there are some white spots of highlights. There are some blues here and there, but I can see basically what I'm trying to say is let's see if we can do the main strokes, not filling the whole thing. So this is what I want to teach you to. You see how we fill all this area, but you can still see the brush stroke, meaning you can see it's not even. There's like edgy stuff, you know. Look at you got this green, but you can see, you know, lighter, dark, like lighter, more green. I didn't try to make it even. And we don't want that. That's the whole thing with Cezanne. So that's what I'm going to do here with some strokes of this yellowish kind of like, I'm going to do lines and areas. So maybe this area, let's fill. Maybe this is a line because that's part of the design. Maybe there's a line coming down this way. So it's like a mustard color. So make sure with the brown and the yellow, you do enough of that color, or you understand how quickly you could create that color. Okay. Let's see. So down here, not on the cloth, down here, there's a lot of it. So maybe like this, curves. So it's circles and patterns. This goes like this. This goes like this. A line again in an angle. Maybe a little bit of it here that goes behind. Another line comes this way. There's going to be reddish and blue colors here too. So there's some lines here on this side. You see, I'm not going over our oranges or things like that. Curve here, line. Make sure you don't. So when your brush carries water, usually when you lift out your brush, when you lift your brush from the paper, that area there carries a lot of the leftover paint. It's like the last chance the brush has to leave pigment behind, and you got to be careful because it's going to be very color heavy. Okay, so look where I'm putting the color, um, all around in different patches and ways, because other colors are going to be in between this, and it's very kind of random. So yours may look different than mine, but you get the idea. There's some curvy little designs. Um, okay, we'll get back to it because there's more colors, like I said, that go in it. But this same color is the color, excuse me, that is um, on the oranges, on the main body of the oranges. But remember, the oranges have some highlights, so we're gonna leave the middle inside of the oranges alone. So I'm gonna go around, but leave the middle alone. Around. I'm painting in the oranges now, same color of like yellowish brown, but I leave the middle alone. Okay, great. I'm gonna leave the blue for a little later. Um, I want to do like a more reddish brown. So I'm taking my brown, which already we know has red, because brown is made out of all three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. But the red, I know it sounds funny when I say brown has red in it, but can you tell what I mean by that? Can you see the red inside the brown color? So you understand that there's a big part of brown that is red. So sometimes when you mix the colors to make brown, you understand that you got to put that little extra red in there. Um, right? Okay. So I got my brown. I'm gonna add like a red because it's mostly like red. And that's the color that's gonna have the cloth line. Sorry, not the cloth body, but the cloth line pattern. And some of the oranges edges around. And in the main huge fabric cloth, there's those circles I'm gonna point out. So let's start with the line in the white fabric here. So this, follow my brush. This area is the white cloth where most things are sitting on top. And this line, and this line is the red line that is kind of like going through the fabric. I gotta make it a little lighter. I can only do that with white. Sorry, with water. You see where I put it? So can you see that it is in what we drew with the pencil? Here, here, and here. And I can always go back and define a little more red in some areas, maybe here and here. Okay. Let's put those little circles, and then we get to the oranges, just to be careful. So this is what I mean by circles around the fabric, but they're not entirely that well defined. I don't complete the entire circle, and I'm keeping it lighter. So, and you see how it's like everywhere. So maybe there's a big circle here, and then over here another. Maybe over here there's a little bit of red over here. We're gonna put we're gonna put greens and bluish, and everything will get filled out. But the fact I want to point something out too. Sorry, the fact that and your painting is gonna look different than mine, but the fact that we're doing this in sections like this and not anything was done as a big chunk evenly painted in color leaves those wide gaps that I want and we talked about and Cezanne was known for. So you can clearly see where his brush, what his brush did is what I'm sorry, that's what I mean. What his brush was doing. If you go over on red on something that was already painted red, you will find that it gets a little darker red, sorry, more opaque, meaning more reddish. And if you want that, you could obviously emphasize that. But now you see how there's some circles here and there, or a few lines, but not that many. Okay, let's leave it like that. You see how it looks sectionized, but now let's tackle the oranges and pay more attention to them with this reddish stuff. So this one to the left in the side will have a more um, reddish kind of outline right there. This one will have a little bit of that on the left, but a lot more on the top right. And I may need to go back with more red, like I just said, and or maybe wait. This one has it on the middle right, the red that we're putting. This one has it on the top left, and this back here don't have that much. Um, this one here, right in the middle, has a little dot right about here, which I'm guessing defines that part of the orange that kind of has that. We know we have red in our brush, so I myself, because looking at the real painting, but I myself gonna judge where else I see red that I have missed, and put it down. So I'm gonna say maybe up here. Oop, that's very brownish and dark. So I'm collecting some of that pigment. Um, Maybe up here. That's a little more defined. But no, overall, things are like I have said, patches here and there, and we'll do it. What is missing in the big cloth here is blue and green. So I'm gonna clean my brush and I'm gonna grab my blue. There may be some yellowish, brownish again missing in some of the oranges. We may have to go back, but those are the colors that we've been using: the green, blue, that we're about to use, this reddish, and the brown kind of mustard yellowish color. But the blue, okay, I'm gonna clean up my palette here because it's full of reddish, and that's what I'm gonna mix my not mix, play around with my blue to make it lighter or darker. So that's what we're doing mainly. Um, we are putting the color in the palette just to control how much water that color has. Okay, um, more than mixing colors, it's about controlling, because in here, in the where the color is in the actual here, it will always be very rich. This, so I can control the lighter version of that with water outside of it in this area. Okay, so I'm gonna start light. You see how I put a little more water? They're still blue, but a little more um, watered down. Okay. Um, let's start with the cloth behind, right? I said they will have blue and blue lines, just like when we did the this brown is yellow. So there's lines that are very defined, and then we're gonna add the green. Basically, you're filling in between these areas with some lines, circles, but remember to not cover everything, to leave some gaps, you know. And this is the same blue that we're going to use to define in the white things like the jars and things like that, there, wherever is necessary to define. Um, you see, are you following kind of like what we're doing? But we want to fill the area, leaving a little bit of the gaps, but the goal is to fill the space, and we're gonna go with green on over and over a lot, especially of the blue. So meaning we leave the red alone and the yellow alone, and feel free to cover more of the blue with the green when that time comes. Um, I'm gonna leave for soon, not right now, the outline blue when it's necessary of the cloth, okay, of the white cloth especially. Because if I start doing that, then I want to complete all that outline, and that's another step coming up that I don't want you to get confused with this. This right now is just filling the area. Um, I know what I'm doing. It looks funny and weird, but it's necessary to see how random this is. Okay, to make it look kind of like a Cezanne. So what happens at the end too is that people familiar with Cezanne will say, "This looks like a Cezanne painting. I need more blue here," and it's not happening with more watered down um, color, but rather I have to add more pigment. And if you wait a little, just a little for it to dry while we're doing, and then you go back and add more color, like I said earlier, it becomes a little more darker, which you may want to do that. So, for example, if I do this and it was this light blue, If I paint right away when it's wet, it will still diffuse. But if I wait to dry a little, when I go back, it's still a little wet. When I go back on more blue, that area that I paint will become a little more darker tone. Okay, so we still need that blue. So I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier. I'm going to get all this blue out into this middle area, a lot of pigmentation, but then I'm going to diffuse the color with water up here. So I get water, water, clean my brush, water in here, water. And I know that up here on the top, my color is more diluted because it has more water. You understand? And I can control that. This is more darker blue, and up here is more lighter blue because it's mostly there's more water than pigment up here. Okay, so I can play. Do I need to make it lighter? Go up here. Do I need to make it more pigmented? Then it's down here. Remember, because we went straight from the color to just set it down here. But let's now go into defining mostly our painting, which is the middle. Okay, let's start with the jar back here. So the whole thing is mostly blue. Remember I said that? But there's barely a highlight right in the middle. So I'll leave just a little gap in the middle. But did you see how I start just painting very light? Now I add more color and build upon it. But it's wet. And remember what I said about when it's wet to make it darker? The paint still diffuses, which is okay because we happen to need the whole thing to be very blue. But soon I'm gonna have to wait for it to dry to go back with my other blue. So let's wait a little for that to dry because if I put more darker blue, it's just gonna diffuse, and I want to have more control. There is blue defining this white one here, so I can make this little. Basically, this is what I'm trying to say. Basically, we could go over with blue over the lines that we drew with the pencil. So here the line is actually going around through the other. The cap is divided by a line here. You know, this is defined too very well. The handle. Down here it may be darker blue because it's more in the shade or shadow. But I'm gonna clean my brush and grab a lot of more clear water here for this shadowing type of, not shadowing, it's just more shade over here to the middle, to the right. And if you see me going straight into the color here, blue, it's because what I'm doing next requires a very more darker blue. And you see what happened here in the cap? It diffused because it's still wet. So I should have waited a little to for it to dry. So it's not being defined, very defined because it's still wet and it's starting to diffuse. But let's do the other thing. So the bottom of this jar, that's white. Just the bottom part could be shaded in blue. We'll go back to make this line maybe more darker once it dries. And yeah, you see how it does get outlined, but not the whole thing. So that keeps it more um, on. Basically, you're making the outline interrupted. Actually, interrupted. Um, so I'm defining this a little gap here, and maybe some lines here, but not the entire thing. And we're going to go back to the other parts as it's getting dry. Let's do the cloth. So we're moving. The whole point of moving around is because we have to wait for it to dry to go back and make some parts blue more darker. So I'm going over a lot of the areas that were done in pencil with light blue. and it could be cool if inter it is actually interrupted, so it's not that well defined. So outline, clear outline, you see, clear outline here. This is what I said earlier that I didn't want to do as we were doing the blue of the big cloth, because I don't want to confuse this, which we're doing now, with the coloring of the cloth before, because this is more about outlining and defining um, the the white cloth. And I know you know there's a fold here, so let's tackle that. And maybe I could fill in here. We could fill in with some blue, but you see how this blue then now becomes the shading of the white cloth rather than representing that the cloth is blue. That's not what we're saying. We're saying this blue represents shading, like a little bit of more shadow. Here in between these oranges and the pot that's white down here gets a little more darker because it's like um, a part of the cloth that's like in shade or shadow. Um, but as before, we're gonna have to wait for it to dry to tackle and make it more darker. Okay. Actually, with darker blue, now that I see this blue, we could put more of that darker blue into the cloth, but we gotta maybe be careful. I'm putting it here and there. But you see how it becomes a little darker just because we're going over something that was already painted blue. Okay, let's go back into what was already blue and make it darker. So over here, this light blue, we're gonna make it even more darker. And let's make really, really darker certain things like this circular thing and the handle. So I'm taking from the actual pigment because I really want to make this very emphasize the handle here. There's a circle here. The bottom to the right of this shape. The bottom and right of this top cover. And the body of the actual entire pot, but a little more towards the bottom and right, because that's what's casting, that's where the shadow is. But the entire thing will take a little layer of blue over to make it a little darker. But you see how I'm still leaving my my highlight right in the middle. Let's make some little lines in this part, like here. It's like a design into the ceramic. Some curves going here and there. He has this could be a little more. It's like a mess down here. Um, but you see now I'm going over the blue that we already did, and it becomes darker. Um, in wherever I put my brush, it's just a tiny little darker representation. And I'm gonna do some lighter lines here to just basically you don't want what I'm doing is we don't want the too white some areas. So we want to represent that it's still a cloth and it has shade and shadows and things. Um, so it can be perfectly white. Is what I'm saying. It's like, I mean, too much white. So, um, yeah. So let's go in the body of this white one here. Um, a tiny little bit of blue into this one. Just a little, just very barely a little bit. We know we have to still do the green, and we know we still have to maybe add a little more yellowish into these oranges. But you see what I meant when I said um, that his paintings are kind of broken down into shapes or pieces. And yes, we see the oranges, don't get me wrong. If you look at the painting, you could discern oranges, you could discern patterns in the fabric, you could discern a jar here and there. But when you look at it for the first time, it takes a little bit of effort to do find those things like these oranges or you know um, so let's do the I might have to come back to more blue if necessary. um, and don't worry, I'm going to show this close up and you could pause it, and I'm going to send you an email so it could be forwarded to you the original painting, okay, that I'm looking at. Very lightly, okay, with a very light blue, not too dark. Remember the lines we did here in the wall, for the wall? So not the entire line, it's intermittent, like, sorry, it is interrupted. So a little bit, that's very dark. See, that's what I meant to make it lighter. And it can only be done with water. Um, so let's make, basically the pencil is becoming the blue. The pens, what we drew in pencil is becoming lighter blue. There's a line down here of the floor too, going that way. And the wall down here could have a little more, excuse me, yellowish. So I have to clean up some of this blue to then play around and control my yellow. I clean my brush. You see how quick? But I did clean my brush as best as I could because I don't want that blue into my yellow. I grab my yellow, then I'm gonna put it into some of the oranges and maybe some of this wall. But the fact that the wall has already brown, the yellowish gets a little more toned down, which is what we want. Okay, so more yellowish into our oranges. I'm keeping in the middle of the oranges that highlight, okay, and I'm still saving some of the mustardy color that was already there. Remember, but the oranges do need to be a little more yellowish. And now they popped up more. Did you see that? So the fabric may need a little more highlights of yellow here and there. And because I'm taking pure yellow and putting it on top of what already was brownish, um, the yellow is not like that pure. If you notice, it's becoming a little bit greenish when I go over everything, like the blue and that's because the colors have been getting mixed. When I go like this over everything, you see that becomes a little more um, greenish because blue and yellow makes green. So be careful not to cover all the blue because you're gonna make the blue disappear. But you do want to maybe do that here and there where things become a little more greenish. And I'll grab green in a moment. but it's not, green is not the emphasis according to the painting I'm looking at. Um, the painting we're actually copying. If your color gets too dirty or too greenish, you could always clean it off. But overall, what we're doing too when we move our brush like this into everything is kind of blending in some colors we see. Okay, so that's what I do. I'm kind of blending in the brush stroke that's already there. Um, yep, a lot went into this painting. Let's put some of that yellow up here in the also wall up here. So, but not everywhere, just in some parts. You put a little bit of it there. I may put a little bit in here, but it's not everywhere. It's just in some sections, and that makes it more interesting. You know, we have a darker bluish in some areas too. Dark, make it darker bluish. Sorry, and if it's too dark, then bring water to tone it down. But you get the idea when I ask to put an area a little more darker, like there or here or here on the top. Okay. All right. Let's grab a little bit of green to put here and there in the fabric, but tone it down with water because we don't want too much of a pure green, and put it here and there. But the thing is this, okay, when we leaving still those little gaps of white here and there that we say are very trait recognizable for Cezanne. But when we don't want to do, when we put a color, yes, it's going to go over some other colors, but we don't want to shut down that other color entirely, because there's a reason why I said that the fabric here has red or has yellow or has, because we can actually see that color in the painting. So we don't want to completely, when we put a new color, shut down what we already did, you know. That'll be uh, challenging for what we're trying to do. I'm gonna put a little bit of in this bottom of this jar, green, but it's, you know, it's just to distinguish between the jar and the fabric. Um, there's some green down here. I can see it. And all these mixes of colors, and when you see a little bit of this color here or a little bit of this color over there, shows that he was kind of playing around. And you could see this also in his landscapes. But there's a palette. I mean, usually when you hear the word palette, it's like a combination of colors that you don't get out of from. You don't get out from. So in a painting, it's very rare. You see tons of thousands of different colors. Usually, there's a selection of colors that repeat themselves. You know, it could be maybe to the hundreds, maybe, but that's it, and that's what gets used all throughout the painting. So in interior design or graphic design, somebody say, "Oh, what is the palette?" Or if you go to this company or this brand, or you go to what's the palette? You see it in their logo, you see it in their furniture, you see it, and they don't get out of those certain colors, right? So Same thing here in his paintings. You can see the little blue he put here is the same blue that's somewhere else. Um, he didn't just focus in one area, finish, right? So he was, I keep emphasizing that, please. Work entirely through that whole painting. And when you draw too, draw like that. Draw working throughout the entire goal of the picture, the whole thing, rather than um, focusing on one thing and finishing and then the next and finish. That's not how it works. You gotta always look at the big picture because whatever you do affects the rest. So if I do something here and gets affected over something gets affected here, I go over here, right? And I balance things around. Um, just like I realized we don't need this. The painting itself is not this rectangular; it's more square. So I stopped myself here. I realized that. So I wouldn't have known that if I'm not working in the entire project. So this is this was very quick the way I worked. So I apologize if it felt rushed. Um, I may have been going very fast, yes. Um, but we did it. This is it. This is it. It has all the pieces of that he represented. Okay. Like I said, I'm gonna email you the original. Let me see if I can find it on my iPad to put it next to the painting we just did. Um, and I'll send this to you, and it will be shared, so you can actually take your time, basically, and take your time working on it. So here's what we did, right? And this is a picture I will send you. That is the original. So maybe as you complete this project and you watch this video again, you may want to take your time looking at this picture I have right now on my iPad, which is the original Cezanne. Okay. Um, yeah, I was gonna take a little bit right here in the corner, right of the floor. So the floor seems to be white, and this is like the part of the wall that I talked about. So I could just, with a brush, clean brush, I could just scoop what I painted here. We'll do that in a second. But you see, it's basically what we just did. It's just a little more random what we did. I'm not really accounting for exactly where each one of these patterns